Hello again. I hope the week is treating you well so far. My name is Victoria or Vicky or Vic, but I'll leave you my sister. I am a historian and a fibre artist based in Manchester in the UK, and I am the human being behind Fibre Haptic. If you would like to know more about what I'm up to, you can follow the social media links. I do apologise, there's a cat out in the garden. You can follow the social media links in the description of this video, and please do check out my shop, which is fibrehaptic.bigcartel.com. Hello. Sweetie. Alright, the cat has been duly met and greeted. We get a lot of cats in our garden, but I haven't seen this particular one before, so that's very exciting. Alright, what I'm going to be doing this afternoon is batch making a load of junk journals out of packaging, a lot like this. Cup of soups are actually a great size for little junk journals, and of course other brands of instant packet soup are available. But this is great because it gives you big enough pages to work on as an art journal or a junk journal. You get the built-in folds where you want them, and you can very easily cut down this side to make a thinner reinforced spine. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to cut this down so we just have one full side as the back cover, a full side as the front cover, and that side as a spine. We're going to get rid of the inside where the cardboard is stuck together and where it overlaps, and we're going to get rid of all these flaps. And for this we're going to use scissors to do the first initial cut to try and cut it open and open it up, and then we're going to use craft knife and metal ruler and our cutting mat. So I'll be back with you once I have done that step. So here is our neatly trimmed, cut down basic book cover. You can see it folds quite nicely in on itself. We've got a nice clean surface on the inside, even though it doesn't look super pretty. And later on we'll be covering up the outside. But before we cover this spine is a little bit too chunky, and it's also a little bit thin. If we make this into a junk journal, it will work, but it's not going to be particularly robust. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut down the middle of that spine. We're going to make sure that the two halves are a little bit wider than some double-sided sticky tape that we've got. This is a centimetre wide, so I'm going to mark the halfway mark there. With the thickness of the cardboard, we are more or less at 3 centimetres there, so that's 1.5. It's going to be, get that centred, 1.5 there. And don't need to draw a line, I'm just going to line up my ruler with those marks there, pick up the craft knife and slice it down the middle. Now, it doesn't really matter which is the front cover and which is the back cover, because I am going to cover these up with some paper in a bit. I quite like having the front cover down first and then the back cover slotting in after it. Really is just a personal preference there though. Get my tape, make sure again it's not too thick. Ooh, it's close, but I think we'll get away with it. Brush the cat hair off. Give myself a strip about yay long, doesn't have to be exact. Okay. To stick that all the way down our spine of our front cover. Now, you can also use a glue stick for that. If this side of it seems a little bit too shiny for the glue to stick well, if you're not too confident about it, you can just sort of sand that down a little bit, just to make it a little bit more of a matte surface. But really, once you've got the paper covering the cardboard, that will also help hold these two halves together. So that's off there. Get ourselves lined up with the top and bottom. Stick that on there. And now that, very good proportion for a notebook cover. Now it's a case of covering up the front of this. There's many ways you can do this. You can cut something which is exactly the same size and glue it down. Then you don't have to worry about any messiness inside. I quite like folding things over onto the inside and then covering the insides as well. So that's what I'm going to show you how to do. Here is one that I did earlier. This was a box of tea bags. So slightly smaller. Again, I cut down the spine and doubled it up. So that is half the width of the original box. It's covered in some painted packaging paper on the outside. I've folded it in onto the inside, and then I've stuck some other pieces of paper on either side of the inside covers just to neaten up those edges and give it a bit of interest on the inside as well. So here is some basic packaging paper. Now if we look at the sort of transparency, I think we are in the end going to be able to see a little bit of the design, but it's going to be quite well covered up. Although you do need to bear in mind that once you put glue onto paper, it does tend to go a little bit more transparent. So things are going to be a bit more visible when they're stuck on, but we can add our own painting and decoration later. We can always put a second layer of this on if it really doesn't work. There's things we can do to neaten this up afterwards, but I think this is going to be a good base layer for any decoration we want to do on this cover. So let's see, we want, don't have to be exact, but we want roughly 1 inch all round. That'll work. It's about a little under 2 centimeters there. Okay, I'm going to very roughly draw out an outline onto my packaging paper. And line that up with the grid on the cutting mat. Let's slice down there. And more or less slice down there. Ooh, this is a blunt knife. Well, all of that's going to remain on the inside, so not to worry. Yes, a bit messy, but it'll be absolutely fine. Just neaten that up a touch. Yeah, slightly better cutting angle, and after this video I will in fact change that blade. Okay, now while I've got this down flat on the piece of paper, I'm going to do a bit of preliminary folding. So I'm going to fold in this outer edge, crease it down quite firmly, fold down the left hand edge there where it'll meet the front cover, and then for the corners I need to open that back up again, fold that in diagonally, and you can sort of see there is a crease mark here which should end up aligning with the top of the cardboard there. So there's a sort of crease here. We're going to fold that in diagonally so that that roughly aligns, and that'll give us a nice corner on there. We're going to do the same thing down here. There is a crease line there. We're going to fold that corner in diagonally so that this crease line is now against the bottom. It slipped a bit, but it doesn't really matter. Fold that corner in, and now when we bring that up back over, that'll be neatly enclosed. And what we're going to do to help the gluing process further on is we're going to take another bit of our double-sided sticky tape, about that long, and we are going to stick this side down with sticky tape before we do any gluing on the back. And that will just help secure this edge and stop everything else slipping right out of alignment as we are trying to smooth the glued paper down on the back cover. I don't know if you, like me, depending on where you were and what school you went to and when, I don't know if you also had to back all of your school provided textbooks in sticky back plastic. If you did have to do that, I expect, like me, you have some pretty visceral memories of everything bubbling up and moving and creasing and going horribly wrong when you were doing that, no matter how many years you've been doing it. This, if we learned this method, it might have helped us all avoid some of those problems. So we've stuck that edge down first with our neat corners. Just going to prepare the other corners while I'm on this side. Fold that in diagonally. Fold that in diagonally. Fold that over, although I'm not sticking it down yet, I'm just getting my folds in place for future reference. Pull back out again. So now we're flipping this over, this side stuck down, we're flipping this over, we're opening it up almost all the way, and we are going to cover the whole of this cardboard with glue stick or with any glue that we have to hand. And smear that all over. It doesn't matter if we miss a couple of spots. It'd be good if we didn't, but if we do, the fact that we're folding the paper around and fully enclosing this should keep everything in place. We won't have any loose corners coming up. So that is good and coated. Now to put the lid back on the glue stick, Vicky. There we go. What we're going to do is, starting from our already stuck end, we are going to start to smooth this paper down. And what's quite handy about having a ruler on you for this process is you can use the edge of the ruler to start smoothing that paper down onto the glue. Now the paper we're using here is a little bit wrinkly anyway. It's not the smoothest in itself. We are going to get a couple of wrinkles from this. Again, we are going to decorate this. So I promise you, once this has got some more layers of interest going on, some designs on it, you are not going to notice any little bubbles and wrinkles. So that is nicely smoothed down. You can see the spine coming through there. You might be able to see on camera, we can see the design a little bit still, but it's not coming through too strongly. I'm going to flip that back over again and fold our corners in. For the sake of symmetry, I'm going to stick this side down with the double-sided sticky tape again. It does just make that edge, which gets quite a lot of handling, it does make that very secure. Let's get a piece of tape down on here. Ooh, gone slightly wonky. Peel that tape off if we can. Yay. That fold it over. You could also sticky tape these down. I don't think it necessarily needs it on the top and bottom edges. They don't get as much rough handling as the side edges of the book cover do. So switching over to my messy mat so I don't get glue on the cutting mat. Going to glue down that edge. Fold that in. You can see that nests quite nicely there without being too bulky. Fold that all in. Again, this bit is not going to be super smooth, especially with quite thin paper, but we will be covering some of this up later. Glue down that edge as well. Put the lid on the glue stick. And fold it back over. And there we have a nice, neatly covered up, pretty well transformed, if basic, junk journal cover from a soup packet. Alright, so for me it is now the evening after the previous bit of filming, and I have fully decorated the inside and outside covers of my junk journal. On the outside here, I went a bit wild off camera, had a bit of fun with it while no one was watching. I've Mod Podged some purple tissue paper that came in some packaging onto here. You can still see bits of the original paper behind it. I've gone round that with a black acrylic marker, and then once that was all dry, I stenciled over it with some gold acrylic paint and some very, very dark metallic purple acrylic as well. So that's what I've done on that side, and that's a lot firmer and a bit more resilient and ever so slightly shiny. It was matte Mod Podge as opposed to the gloss stuff, but it still has got a bit of a shine to it, and that's looking rather lovely, I think. And then on the inside, I've covered a little bit beyond the edges of that backing paper with just 3 pieces of painted paper that I happen to have, making sure that they don't overlap where any of the spine folds are. So those should stay down, those edges should be pretty firm. And I just stuck those down with the same glue stick that I did the initial cover with. So that's my bit of decoration on the outside and the inside, and I did that at this stage because it's a lot easier to decorate the cover, dry it, leave it how you want it, before you put all of the papers in the journal. So that's what we're going to be doing next. Now you might have noticed as I'm waving this around that there are some holes punched down the spine. We've got 6 little puncture marks going all the way through to the other side. And to do this, I used a tailor's awl. You can use a needle, but an awl, they're about £4 to £8 depending on the quality that you get. This one's been absolutely fine. It's good because you tend to get something covering the spike. Oh, so firmly that I can't actually take that off. You tend to get a cover for the spike, which is very handy. And also, unlike a needle, you can press really hard down on this because it's got a rounded end to it. So that's what I use to make the holes. And then to protect the surface underneath, I put down a folded over piece of felt. And you can use anything that the awl won't go all the way through. You need something with a little bit of give to it just to protect your surface. So that, or a clean sponge, lots of wadded up tea towel, an actual towel, anything a bit soft to protect your surface there. And to get those holes in the same place, I used a template. Very, very simple template. I just cut a piece of scrap paper the same width as the cover. I folded it in half to find the midpoint, in half again to find 2 other points the same distance away. I put that down where I wanted it and then just pushed through with the awl, and I'm going to hang on to that template because we are going to need that for our paper signatures. Now, you'll probably have seen me put together a set of signature papers in a previous video. This is one of the 2 signatures which I'm going to sew into this journal. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pieces of paper, all folded in half to make essentially a small booklet. That's all a signature is. It's just a booklet of papers sewn into a bigger book. And I've used a variety of papers for this. There's some book pages which I've painted before. This brown paper is basically just one paper carrier bag that came in a takeaway, and I opened that up, opened the flaps of it, cut it so it folded out into one big sheet, and then measured against the cover how big I wanted those to be. So essentially I was using one cover minus the spine as a template to cut my pages. And as I always do, I've got pieces of paper which are lots of different sizes in there, so you get interesting overlaps. Some of them have been folded in on themselves. Those are going to create some pockets and tuck spaces when we put it all together. So there's a bit of interest going on in there. You can use any kind of paper for this. If you have scrap paper, that's great. That means you've made a whole journal just out of bits of scrap and packaging. If you've got some decorated papers already, that provides a lot of inspiration as you're going through and using the journal. You can use anything you like for these signatures. Once I've got them all folded up together, I've just clipped them so that they stay, so that all of those spines stay lined up. I am going to get my folded up piece of felt, put that underneath. I'm going to get my template, which I've put somewhere. There we go. Now this is going to be slightly wider than the paper because again it is the size of the cover. What you want to do is get it broadly central I'm not too bothered about getting it exactly central because again, a lot of these papers are offset anyway. You could measure the exact midpoint if you want to be more accurate than me. I'm going to get my tailors all, find the spine and stab right through all the layers of paper. Back out again, stab a hole there as well. And our second one. And that's our third one there. That over and make sure I've gone through all of it. Yeah, I've gone all the way, ever so slightly missed the exact point where the spine is, but honestly that ½ millimeter there is not going to make any difference. So now that I've got my 3 holes, we are going to do a 3-hole pamphlet stitch to attach this signature into the cover. Now what I've got here is a length of embroidery thread, quite thick embroidery thread in my case. You could use a few strands of thinner stuff, use some string, whatever you happen to have, threaded through a needle. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go from the center of my signature, we're going to go out through there and into the middle of that bottom row of holes there. So we're going out, we're pulling the thread a long way through, but we're leaving a tail. We are then going to come through one of the side holes here. Again, making sure we're on the same row of holes. We're coming up through one side there, we're coming up through all of the layers of the signature of paper, making sure we don't lose our tail. Okay, so that's our second hole done. We're now going to go all the way across, ignoring the middle hole, to the 3rd hole there. We're going back out again and then through the 3rd hole of that bottom row of holes there. Pulling it through, but not super tight. We don't want to accidentally rip the papers. We want to hold them in firmly, but we don't want to damage them. We don't want to throttle them completely. Okay. And we're now going to go back down that middle hole again, through there, and we're going to come up the other side of that loose middle string to where our tail is. There we go. And then again, just pulling any excess through, but not pulling it so hard that it's going to start ripping those pages. Pulled that through. We've got one loose tail either side of that middle string, and we're just going to tie a basic knot once and twice to secure that off. And that is a basic 3-hole pamphlet stitch. On the inside, we've got a knot tied over a piece of thread that goes all the way across. And on the outside, we've got essentially 2 large stitches. And that holds the whole signature in at 3 different points in the spine, and that holds it really nice and firmly. That is not going anywhere. And these tails, you can do something fancy with them. You could leave them to dangle at the end, and you could put some beads on the end of there if you wanted to keep that. I am just going to snip these off. Not right down to the knot in case it comes undone, but just close enough so that they're interesting but not getting in the way of anything. And then I'm going to do exactly the same thing with my other signature through, where have they gone? Through the other 3 holes. And what I'm going to be aware of with the next signature is to try to make sure that anything I want at the bottom, any little tuck spots I want at the bottom of the pages, I bear that in mind when I'm orienting my second signature. So I'm going to do that off camera. And I'm done. Second signature is sewn in. You can see our second row of stitches there. Exactly the same procedure as before. And we now have a junk journal with 12 pieces of paper folded over and stitched in. And we've got all sorts of interesting things to play with in here already before we've started sticking things in. I've got a page here which is folded back on itself, so we've already got a flip out going on. We've got some tuck spots happening. We've got exciting central double spreads going on. Another little flip out there. Another thing which can become a pocket or the start of another flip out here. You may think, looking at the side, that we've been a little bit stingy there, that actually we could have fit a whole other signature. We could have fit maybe thicker signatures in there and done more pages. You can do that. It is, at the end of the day, a judgment call, but what you have to remember with a junk journal or an art journal, depending on the kind of art you're doing, is how much extra thickness is going to get added as you stick extra pages in, as you stick collages in here, layers of paint, maybe fabric, whatever else you're doing. So to some extent it will depend on what you're going to use the journal for, the kind of things you're going to stick in here, how much you're going to try and stuff into one thing. Honestly, for one journal, for one project to last you a few weeks, month, couple of months, however long you want it to, but for one coherent project, I think this is about the right size and the right number of pages. Again, that's what I think. Your mileage may differ, but that is already looking pretty exciting, I think, and I am quite happy with that. So I've got a whole bunch more to make, and I also have to edit this video. Busy, busy, busy before the peak of the next heatwave hits on Friday. So on that note, I will leave you to your own happy endeavours.